I was going to say, let's see where this takes us today, but it's already damn clear where it takes us. It takes us where it always takes us. Because there's really only one place to go. The place of the heart, the place of truth. And it's all the pain of the world that does one thing for us. It brings us to that gate of the heart. And that gate of the heart has nothing to do with emotions. The emotional heart is a trap. It takes one drop of pure love and mixes it with attachment and locks us into the outer world where we are hopelessly seeking fulfillment. And we have to come to that place of disillusionment with that outer search for love. Because it just cannot fulfill us. It does not have the capacity to do that. As long as we have this outer search, we're dominated by desire and fear. And desire and fear are poisons. And it's so natural, we fall into it as children because we need to be loved as children. We need that outer love. And guess what? It can never be complete. The love that comes from someone else cannot be complete from us. Why? Because it comes from someone else. It can be wonderful. But the face in the mirror is always one reality removed. And the core reality that we need to find in our search for love or truth or enlightenment is the reality of our own heart. And what can happen is that our outward focused life collapses, falls apart. And we go through a huge crisis. Okay, a little intermission until everybody finds their spot. So, we complain about disillusionment. I say it's wonderful. To be disillusioned is the best thing can happen to you. You lose your illusions. Your illusions of needing love from out there. No, that's the wrong way. That's the right way. We're wrestling with the chairs. Okay. Is disillusionment, what are we getting illusioned from? Not by, we don't care what it comes from. Disillusionment is always good, if we understand it correctly. We're getting disillusioned of being these bodies, these persons that we think we are, that have these needs that we're trying to fulfill and these fears that we're trying to protect ourselves from. And that whole time we're like tied into, we're prisoners of our world. Prisoners of what we don't have and what we want and what we fear. So disillusionment is fantastic. You get blank sheet, new start. And then you realize that you write all the pain has pushed you right up to the gate of the heart. The central gate to your divine nature. There are other gates. They're all good. Every gate is good. The heart is the central gate to your divine nature. So cross that threshold, even though it scares the shit out of the ego, because you don't know what will happen. You don't know who you're going to be. You're certainly not going to be that old schlump that was never happy. Well, good for you. So cross that threshold. It's easy. It's surprisingly easy. What's hard is to stay away from that door, to stay in the world of pain. And we're all champs at that. We all know how to do that really well. We do it through our attachments, our fears, our pretense ignorance. The pretense of being something we are not, these helpless beings who are seeking love, and love cannot be found. What we're seeking is already fully here. You know the deal, but maybe somebody's listening who doesn't know it yet. The source of all the love that you will ever experience is your spiritual heart, your hridayam. Hridayam. I am that. Now, we cross that threshold into the heart by bringing our attention to it and really focusing our attention. So let's get technical. How do we do this? We can talk about the heart until the cows come home, but how do you actually get in there? Well, the first level of that practice is to serve. You serve people. And in the traditions of yoga, it's known that that service, selfless service, not service to get some back, love, acknowledgement, appreciation, service for the sake of service. That purifies the heart. It makes it ready to recognize itself. And then, and you're all at that place, you can cross the threshold itself. So, where is the heart? We imagine this point of light in the very core of the chest, the deepest, innermost part of you. Just imagine. Anyone can imagine that. No big deal. Imagine a point of light, a single, brilliant point of light. And then you bring your attention to that. Now, how do you bring your attention to that? You have to have some means to focusing the mind. We all know how to focus the mind. So let's do the here and now exercise 101. It's like, okay, come into the moment. So bring your attention to your breath. Do it right now. You don't have to sit different or anything. You know, it's just like you're breathing, right? So just be aware of that. And you notice an inhalation, then there's a pause, an exhalation, right? Very easy. And as you do that, as your attention is there, your attention on past and future and all the drama involved in that recedes. It becomes less important. Here is your importance is this breath. An inhale, an in-breath, out-breath. So just feel that. So now you have brought your attention from the infinity of the past and the infinity of the future into this little space of a breath. But we're still not in the here and now. We're more in the here and now, but we're not in the here and now because the breath takes, like, say, 3/4 of a second, an inhalation, or maybe a second, and then a second for the exhalation, right? So we're kind of getting closer, but we're not there yet, right? So now you can take your mental capacity and begin to focus on each tiniest part of each breath. So it's like you look at a big painting and you can take in the whole painting, or you can get really close, like with a magnifying glass, and look at one little brush stroke, right? So that's what we're going to do with each breath right now. So breathe your normal breath and then just focus on the tiniest part of each breath that you can become aware of, okay? So what you've done now, maybe you've noticed, then when the mind is really focused on the breath like that, suddenly each breath seems to be very long, like time stretches, right? Suddenly it doesn't feel like a second, it feels like several seconds to just inhale and just notice each little part of each inhalation, right? And then suddenly that break is like, oh, there's really a pause. And then the exhalation again becomes like a whole experience. And then the pause again, right? So now what we're doing simply with the mind is we're getting more focused on the here and now. Now we'll do the same thing, directing our attention to that imaginary point of light, right? Do the same thing. And you know how to do that. So I don't even want to have us do that right now because I know you know how to do that. But here's the next part. The next part is that how are you going to give that concentration power? How are you going to really get the mind to focus? Because you may have noticed that in that exercise we just did, let's wait till everybody settles down. Okay. In that exercise you just did, already maybe the mind started coming in and pulling you out of that focus. Anybody notice that? Yeah, right. So that happens pretty quickly. We can maybe do it with 1 or 2 breaths, or maybe 4 if we're lucky, and then already past and future, and I want and I don't want, and confusion start to intervene, right? Yeah. And these are our attachments. This is our old life, the life that was focused on the outer world, where, as I said, we will never find the fulfillment we seek, because it's just, the outer world's just not qualified to give us that. And I know, I'm very sorry, I'm really stepping on some people's butterfly, because the great romance and all of that wonderful delusion that we have, right? We'll come back to that. But that in itself cannot make you happy. It can be wonderful and exciting and exhilarating and sexy and God knows what for a little while. And when you're 16, that's like, wow, it's going to be forever like that. But you know better than that. It lasts for a little while, and things that are wonderful for a little while, and then they turn to, you know what, aren't worth pursuing. It's like you want a little break in your misery, or do you want to be really happy? And happy means an ongoing state. But some little blip of happiness is not worth calling it that. I mean, it may be great. It shows us what's possible for us, you see, that blip of happiness. It's good for that. But to really have it, it's got to last. So the outer world, nothing lasts in the outer world. And we don't last in the outer world, but we think we are, these bodies. So forget about finding it there. So now we have a collection of pain, of disappointments, of betrayals, of abandonments, of unfulfilled desires, of stuff we fear like crazy. All that stuff is simply energy. We hang it on to different things. Oh, I want this, I hate this, the terrorists, the demons, the politicians, whoever it is that you have some beef with, you know, your mother-in-law. So you take that pain, you take that disappointment, you take the way it hasn't worked for you, this search for happiness, and you let it power your focus on the heart. And here comes the killer. The sharper the pain, the bigger the disappointment, the more energy there is. When you truly know that your search for happiness in the outer world is hopeless, then you're pretty damn close. And you take that energy and you direct it into the focus, into the heart. And you come here. And then the mind takes you out again. The emotions take you out again. And you come back. And you're taken out and you come back. And you come back and back and back until living out of the heart becomes your default mechanism. So when some challenge appears, you may get upset for a moment, but now you've trained yourself and you fall back into the heart, which is, first of all, the most potent medicine for you. Because it's like the black hole for all unhappiness. It just soaks it up and it's gone. But that's only the function that it has of taking what you don't need. And just like it is the black hole for all pain, it is the sun in you for all the warmth and love that you could possibly need. And you direct it and absorb it in your whole being, in your physical body, your mental body, your emotional body. You absorb it, you let yourself be steeped in it. You do this healing work. And it comes from that focus, that refusal to be distracted by the attached mind, by the confused mind. And when there are particular thoughts that are particularly strong and insistent, they come back, like I did it wrong, or they hurt me, people cannot be trusted, I was abused. And those things come back and back and back. Then you give them the medicine of truth through the work of Byron Katie, that amazing sword that cuts right through to the truth. And when you find the truth, that second you can no longer believe the lie. But it may be emotions that pull you out, maybe that old nemesis of your depression or your anxiety or whatever it is. And when that pulls you out, you work it with open attention. You create the internal situation where it can dissolve. So it no longer keeps pulling you out of the heart. And maybe someone you have deeply loved dies. Your whole being is like ready to fall into grief because you believe that you are missing something. That somehow that person, that relationship is no longer there to nurture you. And that is true as long as you believe it. When you understand what we're speaking about here, you will understand that the love you had for this person has always been the love that was here. Yes, that person evoked that love in you, and nothing less in this world. But that love that has been evoked by that beloved person is real and it stays with you. It is your knowledge of your heart. And then you realize that that love can never be taken from you. And the emotion of grief, the emotion of wanting something that isn't, is seen as not necessary. Why? Because the love is right there. You're only separated by the thought that you're separated. If someone is in a body, some capacity for love is in a body, that body is meant to last for a certain amount of time. And then that time is over. And then we have this amazing opportunity to just love. We don't have to worry about that body. We can just love. And you will see that this relationship has just been renewed in a new way. The way of the heart just becoming deeper and deeper, and the love continuing and continuing. And you will be happy for them to no longer have to be in this body that no longer serves them. And that could be a child who dies, and then we say, oh, the child shouldn't die. Well, how do we know the child should die? The child is dead. Everyone dies at exactly the right time. And that includes accidents and murder, in all ways that people die. And the only thing that separates us is that thought, I am separate. The only way the past abuse still can hurt us is by the way we refurbish it in our thinking. We run the tape again and again because it's so interesting to be me. We laugh, but it's very sad. It's very dreadful to see. And we all know how that suffering works because we've all done it. It's just now that we're getting a little smarter, we're getting the key, we're realizing, wait a minute, all the pain of the past is not here unless I create it right now. And you may not know how to stop it. Well, that's what we have open attention for. You understand that the pain of the past abuse, let's say, or the grief, or whatever it may be, that has now become a mental habit that you perpetrate on yourself. Thank you. And you realize you don't have to do it any longer. So you bring your attention into that place that hurts. That old pain of anger in the gut, that fear in the lump in the throat, or wherever it may be. Thank you. And through that opening to that pain, to that which you dread, through bringing your attention into it, you set the stage for that inner healing. Because as long as you hate it, the pain thrives from that energy of hate. You just nail it right in place with that. As long as you want to escape from it, you never can. Because wherever you go, there you are. But when you go there and recognize it as a part of you that needs help, and you treat it with compassion, with openness, with attention, which are the basic building blocks of love, that old nemesis of emotional pain can dissolve and can set you free. And then there's less that can pull you out of the heart. Your love for your mother is in you, all of it. And you're free to celebrate it. You cannot lose from that, you can only gain. And there can be place for grief as well. There's just an old habit, and we still have it. It's okay. That's the place for that part of you that needs help. And paradoxically, that love is the help. So your mother's loving you, you are loving her, and that grief is right in the middle. It won't last that long. It's like you're shining your love onto it. She is shining her love onto it. How long is it going to be there? And then you realize that it's a relief. It's a blessing. And that love affair can continue and continue. Okay, anybody have any questions? Any comments? Any brilliant or silly insights? Please, Leslie.
When I was working with you, I started working with you, and we were, going into the heart sourcing. I always remember that you told me to think of someone I loved unconditionally, and that would bring me to that place in my heart. And then you told me you can be in that place all the time. That person doesn't have to be there. You can live for that place. And that's how I got my first taste of my heart.
Mm-hmm.
It was very small, but it was just enough for me to feel that bliss. And I just kept wanting to go back more and more. And what I used, I used my children. And, and I would think about them when I'd want to go to that space. And that's how I would get there. And the time periods would grow more and more and more until, like you said, all of a sudden it becomes the default. Like that's the place you go to. But that was so helpful to me in the beginning to have that method to access that place. And
now in your case,
mm-hmm.
You have the taste of that. Do you want to deepen it? Do you want to live in the heart more of the time?
All the time.
Then find the sources of your pain.
Mm-hmm.
You know the symptom of the pain, in your case, find the source of that. Because that's where the deepening is, you see? And that's, it's like this old pain that we just rather forget about it. Or it's so repressed we don't even know what the hell it is. So that's why we have to become still. That's where meditation comes in. Because what do we really do when we meditate? We become still enough so we can finally meet ourselves. Because in our usual state, the mind is like always out there, busy, busy, busy. So we need to slow down. So we get to actually see what's going on inside here. Without that, we can't do anything. We can't fix anything. We can't enlighten ourselves, even though we have all the enlightenment that we need already in us. But we won't know because we're busy. Too busy for enlightenment. So, and what keeps us most busy are those deep hidden old pains. I'm talking to you specifically, but it's true for everyone, you know? And it's like you become your super detective. You say, what the hell is going on? I want to be free. So first I have to find what it even is. You know, some of us already know, but some of us need to just become still. And when you become still and simply have this prayer in your mind, in your heart, that you want to know what's in the way. You want to find the obstructions. Then they will make themselves known exactly when you're ready. Now, for some people, that seems like, oh, this whole avalanche of stuff coming up, and it feels like, oh, I'm being overwhelmed. Well, you know, that's another thought. Mm-hmm. So again, when you believe you're being overwhelmed by something like that, then you're having the experience of being overwhelmed. But it starts with a thought, I'm being overwhelmed. Question it. Understand that we now here through our practice have a way of living life in a much more skillful way than what we've been taught. Whatever comes and seems to be a source of trouble, we can free ourselves of it. We have the skills. But sometimes it's like we fall back into the old mode and, you know, some big challenge appears and we go into freeze mode and we can't remember, right? For that, daily practice is important because it's like you get into this point. I always talk about the roller coaster. You know, you're on the high point and then it goes down into the valley. And at that moment, you forget everything. All the training you had and the skills like out the window and you go, ah. But if you have your daily practice, the time comes and you sit your butt down and you grab a worksheet or do whatever it is of the skills, whatever you do, and you'll catch yourself right there. Say, wait a minute, I don't have to fall back into my craziness, into my despair, into my overwhelm. And we open new doors each time with that, new doors of sanity. So the best thing you can do is find that place in you, or even intend to find that place in you, where that deeper pain is that you haven't found yet, where you just see the symptom, the acting out, right? So go into stillness with that intention, may this be revealed to me. And it can never be overwhelming. And it can be profoundly freeing instead. So I didn't finish my thought about, you know, when the thought comes, I'm overwhelmed, that's just a thought. Question it. And as you question it, the power of that thought, the thought only has power by you believing it. When you believe you're being overwhelmed, well, honey, you're gone. That's the experience until you come back to some semblance of sanity. And sanity means not to believe your stressful thoughts. So question them, right? That's one way it can come up. It can also just come up in bite-sized portion. Great. And sometimes it comes up in sort of like the tiny little trace. It's like ice fishing. You know, ice fishing, they go out on a lake in the winter and they cut a little hole and they put down their line with the bait, right? And then you wait and nothing happens for like 8 hours and you're frozen stiff. And suddenly there's like this tiny little nibble. Something's like eating the bait, right? And you have to like watch for that little nibble. And then you go and you pull it up and there's your fish, your dinner. So sometimes we find the hidden old pain like that, right? But the point is that you become a spiritual warrior. And that is, a warrior means you are not shying away from your work, which is to find the obstructions and eliminate them, so you can live in the heart more and more of the time. And when you live in the heart more and more of the time, what you see is that first you become transformed, because this inner warmth, this inner light, is immediately available. And if you had this anger or fear, let's say in your gut, and it could be anywhere, you know, you had that like all your life, and all your pain was like centered here. Suddenly there's a sunrise in your heart because you're becoming aware of your heart. And it just shines its warmth down into this crisis area in your being. And the healing is profound and powerful and quite rapid. And then something changes. There's this alchemical change inside of you. Something starts to realize in you that you are not this helpless person needing love from everyone else. But you realize that you are that love inside of you. That's really the core. That your whole world is projected out of that place in you beyond time and space. That deepest center of your being, that heart, that hridayam. This whole world that you experience as a projection on the screen of your mind is projected by that light in you. And we've done this crazy thing. We've projected a whole world full of people, just like at night when you dream. You create a whole world there, so you know you can do it. And here we have created this world. And then there was one character on the screen, and we jumped into that one, said, okay, I'll be this one. I'll be her. I'll be him. And we developed tremendous attachment to that. And now we're screwed. We're in these bodies and we think that's who I am, or that's who I always thought I am. And being that person always entails pain. There will be, as the Buddha taught us, sickness, old age, and death, and all the drama associated with that. But you see, that pain doesn't exist in that place that projects it. Now, what I mean by projecting, that may not be clear. But what can be clear is that we experience our body, mind, personality, and the whole world around it in our mind, right? Can you follow that? That's pretty simple, right? It's all experienced inside the mind. We call it outside, but it's actually experienced inside. So we're conscious of it all inside of us. And that includes this thing that we call I. We're conscious of that inside of us. And when this consciousness is tainted by desire and fear and confusion, then our whole world has that taste to it. But as we go into the heart, we can begin to understand that that consciousness is actually of the nature of love. And we are the first beneficiaries of it. We start feeling it. And then that can spread, and suddenly you start realizing, you know, there's really nothing that stops me from loving everything, just the way it is. And then we notice, we say, oh no, you shouldn't be doing this. And we just notice that the heart goes, and what happened? Oh, I fell back into the mind. I just had my daughter here visiting. First the older one, now the younger one, right? Plenty of opportunity. I was like really savoring this because I could think from my old role as a father, I could think of how I would want her to be. Hopeless. Totally hopeless. And I just decided to love her the way she is instead. Much better.
I have a question in the chat. Rosemary asks, when you need to make a big decision, like moving to a new city, buying property, how do you know you are making it from the heart and not from what makes sense to do based on old patterns?
Well, I find it a little difficult to give you a general answer for that, but if you're only thinking about what makes sense from a financial point of view or something like that, okay, so do your homework and figure all that out. And then don't sign the contract quite yet. Then take 3 days off. Schedule the closing for 3 days from now and take off and relax and ask yourself, do I really love to live there? Is that where I'm being pulled? And there's already a yes or a no here. So you don't have to figure it out, because we can't figure these things out. We can't figure out life. There's just too many factors involved. You know, you want to move to another city. What the hell do you know what it's going to be like there? You can't know it. Up here, the mind is just not capable of it. There's a billion different factors to consider, and more than half of them you can't know because they have to do with a future that hasn't happened yet. Mm-hmm. But through the stillness of just sitting with that, and again here, meditation is so important, right? Meditation and the other skills to get rid of the garbage that distracts the mind all the time. We have this capacity for intuition, the intuitive mind, the wisdom mind. And that already has the answer. So it's a matter of tuning into that. And sometimes somebody offers you this great deal of something or other, and it really looks like a great deal, and something in here already says, nope. So you don't even have to go through all the rigmarole of trying to figure out if that's the right deal or if it makes sense financially, all that kind of stuff. Just listen to that. But sometimes you have to do all the footwork and then sit still and then see if there's a yes or a no. And that's what I would follow. And it's interesting because sometimes we don't follow that and then just find out what happens. You know, it may still be okay, or maybe not. We'll see. And sometimes you may follow that voice of the heart, and it may appear to get you into trouble. But it will be the kind of trouble that's exactly the right trouble for you. Because when have we ever learned more than by dealing with trouble intelligently and skillfully? And then you realize there isn't really any trouble. There are just those challenges that have to be part of the path. Just imagine yourself for a moment without any challenges in your life. Who would you be? You wouldn't even be a human being. You couldn't even walk, because walk is a big challenge for a little kid. You know how many times they fall on their butts before they can walk? And they just get up and do it again, because it's time for that. So when you're faced with some kind of challenge or other, and you fall on your butt or your face, just get up and do it again. Learn from the little kids. They can show us. But this is a good question, Rosemary. That's following the heart, following that wisdom in you that's already there. And with practice, as we get more of an open channel to that intuitive part of us, that intuitive mind, we can more and more surrender our life decisions to that. The big ones and the little ones. In my case, it was the big ones first. And I was still griping about the little stuff and, try to get it right and so on. And now I'm sort of cooling off on that one too. But so the big decisions of where I'm going to be and what I'm going to do is like, I guess through the grace of my guru, I just knew that I didn't have a clue. So I just kind of left it up to him to tell me, and he always does. And sometimes he doesn't do it when I want to know, but he does when the time is right. And now I'm realizing increasingly that it's even the smallest decisions that this works for. We have, see, the two qualities of the soul. We have the personality, right? The personality is the outer shell of our being. And that's what we identify with. That's what our world has taught us to identify with. Our thinking, our emotions, our behavior, our bodies, and the world out there. And that's the passing show. That's the movie on the screen. But when we go deeper, we see two qualities here. One is this intuitive intelligence or the wisdom mind. And the other one is that boundless, absolutely unlimited source of love. That is the soul. And when the soul, who you are, identifies with the personality, then you're in trouble. Then you're in the world of suffering. And of course, that has happened to all of us. So we're in that box and we're got a little bit of an idea, we want to get out. Because when the soul is identified with its very innermost core, which is the supreme, what we call God, and then put pictures on it. And the soul is identified with that innermost core of our being. Then we become free. We become increasingly free in every event, everything that can possibly happen to you now or in the future will serve to free you more, will serve to bring you into the recognition of your true divine essence. So what can really be scary? We can still have fear. It's like an old habit still sticking to us. But it's on its way out. Just an old habit. Because when everything can only serve you to bring you to that source of absolute love, of complete wisdom, then what can actually be scary? Except just an old habit.
You said that the soul when the soul identifies with its inner core, isn't the soul already its inner core?
Well,
Why does the soul needs to be identified with something?
the soul in its true essence is one with the absolute. But the soul is this entity, this bundle of habits and of habits, really.
Isn't that the personality or the mind?
No, the personality is temporary into this life. The soul is this bundle of habits and, yeah, just habits, really. Habits of thinking, habits of feeling, habits of pain, habits of happiness. This kind of way you all have this sense of what it's like to be you, right? Well, that's a bit of a taste of the soul filtered through the personality. So that bundle of habits or potentialities becomes incarnated in a body and then identifies with that body, says, this is me. I'm a boy, I'm a girl, I'm smart, I'm dumb, I'm tall, I'm black, I'm white, I'm green, I'm yellow. So we have all these false identifications. And for a lifetime, that becomes the vehicle that we're riding in, right? In the Bhagavad Gita, this symbolism of the chariot. So if you know the story, there is Arjuna, the great warrior, and you are Arjuna. And he is in this chariot in the middle of this grand battlefield where his whole family on this side, one side of his relatives, on that side, the other side of his relatives. In other words, his entire world is just ready to eliminate each other, right? So that the moment before the cataclysm. And he is in this chariot, but he doesn't drive the chariot. Krishna drives the chariot. The avatar, the incarnation of the Supreme, is the driver, and he's the warrior. And Krishna says, okay, we have a moment here, let's take it. And they drives the chariot in the middle between the two armies, like good and evil, the world of duality. The chariot is the body. It's got the horses, the senses, the reins, the will. You can see every part of the chariot is part of this personality. But you're not the driver even. You're not the chariot for sure. It's like saying, well, I'm my Toyota. It's just about that intelligence when you really look at it, saying, I'm this body, this personality. So you're not even the driver. Somebody else drives. Have you noticed that? That somebody else really drives your life? You think you're doing it. Suddenly something happens and you realize there is some other level of reality going on that you didn't intend. So God is the driver, and God can be a friend. Arjuna and Krishna are the closest of friends. And Krishna, however, is still the supreme, and Arjuna is the student, and he learns. And Krishna drives him in the middle of these two armies, and Krishna's knees go weak and say, I can't do it. This is my freaking family on both sides. I'm supposed to kill all of them? And this immense teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, maybe the core of the Indian teaching, evolves out of that, where he's being taught the different yogas, the yoga of action, the yoga of will, the yoga of devotion, the yoga of wisdom. And it culminates in Krishna telling him, showing him very clearly, you are the warrior. This is your dharma. Do your duty as a warrior. I have already killed all these people. You're just my instrument. So what does that mean? We're not advocating killing here. What his arrows are hitting are the representatives of evil. So in other words, he is finding those places in him. This is the real interpretation. This is not about something that happened some 1,000 years ago. This is something that happens in us all the time. The arrow is truth. Arjuna's arrows is shot at the representatives of confusion, of anger, of greed, of ignorance. That is what's being eliminated. He's doing exactly what we just talked about. He's looking for the obstructions in his being and eliminating them. And with that, the world of good and evil collapses on itself, and you are free in the non-dual state, the state where your heart can encompass it all as it is. And as it is doesn't mean you're suddenly dead and you won't act. Quite the contrary. When you deal with reality as it is, then you're actually getting in touch with the way it is. And I say, oh, this should be different. I'm not dealing with this or this person that I want different. I'm dealing with my idea of how they should be different. Can I just first see them as they are? And then see what action comes out of my intuition and my heart that makes sense at this moment. It is compassionate and carried by wisdom. This is something businessmen can use to cut through the confusion and the fear that so often drives their actions and deal with clarity. We all can use that. And I have no idea what your question was, but I hope I said something that makes sense about it.
Can I ask you something?
Please.
When you are in a place where there are a lot of people, competitive people, and
Competitive people?
and they have their egos all the time.
Right.
How do you know where are you judging them because you feel that they have egos and it's not you having your ego looking
Right.
at them?
Well, it's very simple.
How do I make the difference?
Guide her to the bathroom is over there. Yes.
How can I know where I am acting by heart and not by my ego also?
It's very simple. You're asking really, I think, about the difference between judgment and observation.
No, it's like I am asking for help to survive in an ego place, because I work on television and there is a lot of ego there.
Well,
so I
if
feel
you
compulsive with that.
If you work among a lot of egos, that's great. Because they're going to poke all the places in you
Exactly.
that
And I
are
feel
still
exhausted.
reactive, right?
Yeah.
So here, the first thing you need to know, I think, is the difference between observation and judgment. Like you see them and they're on this ego trip, right? Well, when you judge them, it's stressful. When you observe them, it's like, oh, look at him. Okay, this is what he's doing. This is ego at work, right? Yeah. Perfectly. There's no stress in that, right? The observation, you're free. Judgment, you're caught. You want them to be different, right? So this is the first thing. And you identify when you feel stressed by somebody, right? And then identify what exactly you want from them. What advice do you have for them? What should he be or not be or do, right? Well, that belongs on a worksheet. Then you clear your thinking, right? And then the next day you go back and it'll be just a little bit easier. You won't be as reactive as the day before, right? And then somebody else is going to push your button. And it's always good because if you want to be free, you have to know where your buttons are. That's why there are big egos in this world. They're all there to serve us. and they're perfect at that, right? So, yeah.
Well, I'm going to have a doctorate on that.
Well,
but sometimes the feeling that I have is like I am overwhelmed, like I need to go to my house and get rid of that or that.
Well, listen to that. That's good. But that's not.
I have to clean myself.
Yeah, see, if you're more of an introverted person and you're working in an extroverted kind of, in TV, like in your case, so you're working in an extroverted marketplace, workplace. This is somewhat for introverted people. It's just because of that, it's even hard for them to live in the Western cultures because they're all extroverted. I know many people like myself too. When we first came to India, like the moment we set foot in India, it was like, finally I can relax. I feel like I'm coming home because it's an introverted country, right? Now, of course, ideally, what we need to find is to have the introversion and the extroversion. In other words, not being caught in the external world, but being able to deal with it well, right? So the first thing, you identify where you're stressing. And that comes from your mind. So you put it on worksheets. If it's more of like this emotional grind where you don't really know what the thoughts are, open attention. You see, we have the right tools. When you do that and you just work on your thoughts and your feelings for a while and they get thinner, lighter, the third level, which is just sort of the ego level, the way where you are identifying yourself as a person against the world, kind of, right? That just gives way by itself. There's not much we have to do there. We need to work on getting the thought process clear and the emotions clear, because these are the primary layers of obstructions. Then our behavior falls into line, our body becomes more harmonious, etc. And that happens then as a matter of course. So if you can clear your mind and your emotions, you'll see it gets easier and easier for you to work there. But when you feel like, oh, this is really too much, well, listen to that. Give yourself the time. And you can do a lot of work when you're really focused on it. I remember this time, I'm sorry, some of you heard this story before. I was going to visit my parents who were in a old folks home, right? I had to put them in there because they just couldn't manage living in their own house anymore. I'm the only child. So I get there, they're in Europe, right? So I'm not there a whole lot, but I get there and I open the door and there is these two people that I love so dearly and they're like terribly depressed. And I was going to be there for like a week. And I go home and I'm like in the grip of this judgment that said my parents shouldn't have to suffer. What a good thought. Too bad it had nothing to do with reality. You see, I'm using this because even a really good thought can be very stressful because it's not aligned with the reality of the moment, right? So I went home and I really, this was so intense for me, I really didn't want them to suffer. So I did the work on this thought very intensely. It took me like 2 hours to really clear my head. Then I was done. I felt fine. I went to sleep, slept like a baby. Next morning, went to see them again. And I was just happy to see them. I was no longer in the grip of this thought. You see, I saw the thought as a lie. In other words, I had realized that when it is time for them to suffer, it is time for them to suffer. And there was nothing I could do about it because there was no other options, right? In terms of their life situation, right? So I open the door, and I'm going like, so happy to see you. And these two old people, both in their 90s by then, right? Just went like, so happy to see you. And they just perked open. And we had a wonderful week together, just wonderful week. And they never fell back into that depression. Now, imagine I would have gone there the next day without having done my work, right? And like, oh, I'm so sorry you're so depressed, right? Basically with that attitude. It would have never helped them to climb out of it, right? So when you clear yourself, you serve not only yourself, you serve everyone you come in contact with, right? I do this little experiment sometimes. We go to a beach here in Miami, and there's all these people right on the waterfront, and I can go on the water line, past all of them, and I can go there like this, and everybody is like this, right? And I go there like this, and everybody's like opening up, smiling at me, waving. We're just having this day of bliss with each other, So your primary duty is to clear yourself, to enlighten yourself. That who you are is the most important thing you have to contribute. And then you do your job also, whatever they have you do there, that the stuff that they pay you for, right? But your real job as a soul is to use any situation, like a work situation, perfect, family situations, wonderful for that, right? Is to see where you're still hung up, because that's where we grow. In this immature way of spirituality, we think everything should be light and wonderful and lovely, and it's okay. It's a stage everyone goes through, and then we see that all our crap is still firmly in place. And some people then at that point get totally disillusioned and turn away and run back to a psychiatrist for a pill or something like that, right? And there's nothing wrong with pills. But what it really is to see the places where we're hung up. Our challenges are our opportunities. And that's sort of a beat up old way of saying it, but it's just so true. And then the question is, what skill do we have to deal with this stuff? How do we really get free of it quickly and most effectively? And that's what we're trying to do together here. Please.
I had a situation about 16 years ago when my mother was dying. It was my question of if, it was a question of when. She was in the hospital, she was dying. And I was suffering. All of a sudden I took her hand, and I was so happy that I had all this love for this woman. I don't know where it came from. And I felt so much love for her. And I knew I had all this love. And I had all this love from her. And I was so relieved. And it was the secondary part was that she was going to die.
Yeah.
The primary thing was that I was so fortunate. I was so grateful to have this.
Wonderful.
And I've held on to that, and I've never felt badly about her death.
Well, it's even better than that in my experience. Both of my parents were quite old when they died. It was like time, even in my stupid mind, right? It is much harder when somebody dies young. We have a much stronger idea that they shouldn't have died, which of course is totally delusional. Everyone should have died who died, in reality. But my experience with my parents specifically is that the love just continues to grow. The relationship continues. And it just gets better every time. Every time there's like a deepening of that love. And I'm really happy for them to no longer have to be in those bodies, because those bodies were done. And when somebody dies and they're 4 years old, well, that body is done. We tell ourselves stories to the opposite, and that those stories create the suffering. I just spoke to a woman who when I was a psychotherapist, I had this client who came to me because she was given 6 months to live. She had cancer. And she couldn't talk to her family about this. She wanted to be conscious about this transition. She couldn't talk to the family about it because they were too freaked out. And so she came to me, and we developed this really deep, wonderful relationship. She ended up living 8 more years. And we continued this relationship to 8 years. It was just fabulous, really deep, wonderful relationship. And then she died at her home. And I was like right around there those days. And the day after she had died, I met in her kitchen with her sister and her best friend who had flown in from somewhere. And we were sitting there talking. And the two ladies were having grief. And I didn't, because I had dealt with her dying for 8 years. For me, it was just this completion. It was wonderful. And suddenly her spirit, her presence is in the room, but so tangibly, right? I mean, it was just there, right? And I'm saying to them, she's here, can you feel it? And they couldn't. And I saw it was because of that grief. That grief was like a wall. The grief comes from the thought, he or she isn't there. And then we can't experience them even if they're like right here in their essence. It was like so tangibly real. She just didn't have a body, but everything else of her was there, right? So you may look and see that what you're experiencing toward your mother now is not just the recognition of the love that you had and shared, which is wonderful, but that over the last, 15 years, that love has just grown and grown, and it continues to grow. You know? That's the wonderful thing. Like, we don't lose anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a comment by Kamala.
Kamala. Hi, Kamala.
The heart sourcing has been a slow process for me. However, as the opening is happening, I am trusting myself and others more easily. Now my path is opening up in an area that requires more vulnerability and trust, which I'm actually excited about.
Yeah. Wonderful. Just keep going and know that you're fully held in that heart. There's nothing that can happen to you in terms of vulnerability. We're always afraid. And we're afraid because we've lived in this misunderstanding of love, that it was something that we would have to get from outside, that could be taken away. So when you love someone really, really deeply, and you just, with every fiber of your being, you want to be with them, and you can't, because they leave, because they die, because they have some other business, that's very exciting. Because then something better just has got to come. This is a cosmic law. It has to come. And you will not be able to experience it when you think you're missing something. Because then you're busy missing something. So in reality, you see, when you love, that's not dependent on the object. You may think so. You may have that experience. Oh, but I love him. The fact is that you love. And if he has to go, love wouldn't hold on, would it? Love wouldn't attach itself. Love wouldn't say, well, if you're leaving me, I'm going to get really freaking mad. And I'm going to hire the biggest lawyer that I can find, the meanest guy in town. You know, that is the distortion of love that happens in the emotional body. Where love, this bit of love gets mixed with attachment. Very dangerous. And it creates, for instance, grief. It creates this kind of warfare, you know, and so on. But when we realize that the love that you experience cannot be diminished when they leave and you let them, because you don't have a choice anyway, right? And you realize that now something better has got to come. Oh, I'm just so excited and open. And then you will find it. You will notice when it comes. You know, maybe the husband has to leave because the love of your life is waiting. But if you're mad at the husband, the love of your life sits on the bus next to you and you won't even notice because you're mad. And mad, I mean literally. So I'm going to just wrap up my spinning mind here, talking about vulnerability, right? So because we have always thought that love is dependent on someone, on some object, We have developed fear of love because that love, it seems, could be taken away. And this comes from childhood. Inadvertently, we learn that, right? And in heart sourcing, you get to learn that your love is absolutely independent. It's there like a rock. It doesn't change. Not really, rock is not the greatest metaphor, right? But it is just like the sun. It is radiant and self-effulgent. And when you open, you're just, when there's the fear of vulnerability, you're afraid of that old understanding or misunderstanding of love, that something could be taken away. But in reality, that's not real, because your love is here. And if you have come to you to experience that, and you're no longer under the illusion of love having to come from somewhere else, then it becomes very clear that you are invulnerable. And this reality is timeless, it's eternal. It cannot be taken from you. Not even death can take that away from you, because that's what you are. So as you become more and more established in that, even death loses its sting, its fear. And that's the deepest fear for the personality. So go for it. You had your hand up?
I just
Okay.
was going to say what you said, that isn't our greatest love or our love, the love that we are. So you said, yeah.
4 years ago, when my husband decided that he wanted to separate, it took me a while to understand. I was actually praying for the attachment to stop, to cease, to stop feeling that pain. And it's when I realized that, in fact, we wanted the same thing. We both wanted joy in our lives, except that we both saw it in a different way. Mm-hmm. He saw it leaving me, I saw it staying with him. Yeah. But we really both were united by that same wish of being joyful. So in fact, we had much more in common than we had.
Not in common.
Not in common, yes. And then suddenly that I started realizing little things about the fact that someone who was capable of looking for that joy, seeking it within himself, even if society said something, the kids, the finances, the security, even over that, was able to look for that joy within him. Yeah. I said, he actually is a very honorable man. Yeah, I take my hats off. Yes.
He was your teacher as he left you.
Absolutely.
Right? And you know what? That's true for everyone. When they leave us, they give us a very important gift. And that's the knowledge of where our attachments are, the knowledge of where our pain is, the knowledge of what we cannot yet see about ourselves. Right?
And when I opened to that, and I actually started being grateful for it, we started creating a relationship. I'd say that it's 100, 1,000 times more beautiful than it was when we were married.
Right.
And it's pretty amazing.
It always happens that way when attachment leaves. Mm-hmm. And attachment can be attachment to somebody's body when they're no longer can be in that body. When the attachment leaves, then there is no longer grief. And then that love can blossom further and further.
Right. Then it's just the unconditional love that remains.
Right.
Absolutely. So it is pretty amazing, yeah.
That's amazing.
Now we're all somehow raised in this way of seeing the world as a problem. And I think that's got old for all of us. And we're finding a different reality. And it's still sometimes it's like a new outfit that you slipped into that doesn't quite feel like you're at home in it yet, you know? But just wear it for a while. It'll grow on you. This world is, when you're attuned to the presence of God, just to use that word, which is very appropriate, when you're attuned to the presence of God, you realize that this world is entirely a world of the presence of God, that everything reflects the presence of God back to you. And the question is only, do you have the eyes to see it? Do you have the heart to feel it? Or are you walled in within yourself? And if you recognize that, remove the walls. Here are the ways to do it. And no one can do this for anyone else. You have to do it yourself. It can be pointed out how to do it, or that it is even possible. See, most people have no clue that it is possible. But we know. So then it becomes our joy and our duty to ourselves to do this self-liberation process. Liberation on purpose is what Byron Katie calls the work, and it's so right on. Liberation on purpose. No longer a need to suffer. Yeah?
I have a question because you always talk about the heart and the light and going in, but I don't feel it. I mean, I don't know if it's a thought that makes me think, okay, I'm not feeling it, and it's like I have to do the work on that, or do I have to continue meditating to feel it?
Why are you coming back then?
Because I wanna find it.
Okay.
So, but I don't feel it like she was talking, or when you talk about it, I don't feel it.
Right. Yeah. Well, but I'm also saying very clearly, at first we can't feel it, but you can have an idea. So something is, you feel an attraction. Maybe it's just sort of through the mind, an attraction to this idea, an attraction to this sense of maybe love is possible, right? Well, it wouldn't attract you if you wouldn't have experienced love at one point or other, right? So you have just a little bit of an idea. And now there's a big shift here in terms, first, you experience love when someone shows up in your life, whether it's a parent or a lover or a child or whoever, for whom you just suddenly and spontaneously feel this feeling we call love, this openness, some recognition of your oneness with that being. That's really ultimately what it is, right? And then a desire arises to have more of that, but you're still in that mode of seeking it from outside and believing that it has to come in the right object, and then you'll feel it, right? And what we're saying is separate yourself from that need and cultivate the access of it in here. So at first, in the first stage, you just work with your mind. You work with imagining a point of light here. And it's perfectly fine that you don't feel it. Don't worry about it. So the point of light, first you work with that. You bring your attention into it like I just showed you today. Then you can imagine the light gets bigger like a sun. Feel, now here comes the word feel, right? So you're imagining the sun. What does a sun do? A sun emits warmth and light, right? So if you're still enough, you may just be able to sense that, the effect of that in your body. So in other words, that sun here in the heart radiates, and a sun radiates effortlessly. There's no effort here. You don't have to force yourself to radiate. No, you just have that image in mind, and it's just an image, it's just mental, right? Have that image in mind, and then relax your body and your mind, and see if you can become open to that, to actually experiencing just a little bit of that warmth, of that kind of relaxed feeling that comes from that warmth, right? And that's how you start to actually begin to feel it. You're breaking through that defense in your being that does not yet allow you to feel that spontaneously. Well, that's okay. That's exactly the right place where you are working on this, right? And then slowly with practice, and it's always cumulative. So whenever you make an attempt at feeling the heart, it builds and builds. There's never, you may not feel anything for many times, but each effort is moving you in the direction of that, right? By increments, until you suddenly start to notice, oh, I'm feeling something, and maybe I've actually felt it for a while now. But we feel things, and we're all so cerebral that we don't even realize we're feeling something. That happens very often to people, right? So it just comes with practice. And the practice doesn't have, I mean, it's great to do a formal practice. That's why we have put the CD out, and Living with an Open Heart. And you can actually listen to a meditation that goes on for like 15 minutes or 12 minutes or something like this, and actually let yourself do it. That's like a practice. But any moment during the day, you can sit in traffic and gripe about the gridlock, and how great is that? Or you can spend the same amount of time in the same place and just breathe in and out of the heart. Imagine the breath to like move through here. You don't have to feel anything, just do that. Or say a mantra and have the mantra repeat in your heart, imaginarily, right? This is all, you're working with your mind, but your mind is now working on not distracting itself or griping or desiring or fearing or confusing itself. It is moving you into the very core of your being, to that gate. And even better when you have some pain, because you can use the pain like a key to get you in there and get you really to focus. And that just speeds up the process. Right? So we're using pain actually as a curative agent. It cures the mind from its shut down position where we can't feel the enormous abundance of our being, right? Now, when I say to you the enormous abundance of our being, this is somebody else talking. You don't have that experience yet. That's perfectly fine, right? But, maybe, I don't know, something in you figures that it may just be true for me. And if it can be true for me, like I'm not sitting here faking this, right? Then you know that you are just a human being just like I am. So it can become true for you also, right? This is what happened when I met my guru. I'm like, this like incredible being with this love that was so inspiring that it just touched us like a force. And the second thought after this moment of awe, the second thought was, well, if he can have it, I can have it. Because he was human just like me. So if you hear us talking like this and something in you says, well, I'm curious. I don't feel a damn thing right now, but I'm curious because it sounds very alluring. Let me just see if I can move in that direction, right? Well, then that is put in motion, and it's just a matter of time and practice. Yes, ma'am?
I really don't know how to put words into what I want to say, but I'm glad that she asked that question. See, to me, heart sourcing is not my objective, is not the feeling. And I've said this since I've known you. What I've gotten from this, it's the possibility to change my old habits of suffering into different habits that I'm more happy with, into habits of compassion with myself, kindness, self-acceptance. And honestly, I don't need to locate the sun in the heart. Because when I understand that there is a, let's say, an emotion, I can recognize it, and the idea that I can opt for love instead, that to me is a heart sourcing. So to bring heart sourcing, the practice, into just that aspect of the point in the heart center, it's valid. It is not for me. That's not the way I feel my process of heart sourcing. It's more an embracing of what is in the moment. How am I reacting to it? The witnessing process that goes when I'm seeing, oh, I'm caught in my old personality. And there is an understanding that I now have the idea and the ability to choose something different. That's what makes my heart shine, when I choose something different than what I used to.
Yeah, right.
So to me, all is valid. Once you get to know yourself, be okay with it, with the way it is, and love yourself instead, and then therefore other beings. That's a hard source for me. I mean,
I'm just laughing because you live with me. You are the most loving person, day in and day out, consistently. It never stops with you. You have your moments, yeah, of course, but they're like over in a flash. And you're right back in the heart. You don't need to imagine a sun in your heart. That's a tool. And there are many tools like that. That's one.
Yeah, that's
right?
I know I wanted to say that because it's just a tool. Like for me, mantra, it's what I think my tool. When I'm in this moment.
Mantra, the
comes
breath,
into it. Breath,
right?
Yeah.
I had one woman comes to mind who had this imagery come up from the heart. And I asked her, what is your life like? Tell me, when you look at it through the heart. And she saw this desert landscape. My husband has left me. My children don't communicate with me, right? Desert landscape. And she was very visual. So for her case, this is what came up, right? So we're talking about different ways of it, right? Now I know something about the heart. So I said, okay, so you have this mountain, desert, valley, not anything green inside. Rocks, sand, heat, dryness. And I said, there's got to be some water here somewhere. Look for it. And I sent her to look for it. And she couldn't find anything. It was just her life, her heart was barren and dry, right? And then she found it. There was some trickle of water somewhere in the depth under a whole bunch of rocks, right? And then I said to her, okay, so why don't you start removing the rocks? Just take some rocks away. What are the rocks? Stressful thoughts, negative emotions, all the trips we fall into, the old shit that we carry, and so on, right? So you remove the rocks. You do that work of removing the rocks. And then after a little while, there was a little more of a trickle, right? And to make a long story short, she took her some time to remove the rocks. And then there was this little stream coming out of the side of the mountain. And after a few months of this, and this image just kept staying with her, her barren landscape had changed into this blooming garden, this paradise. And about 3 months later, she met a man, and they're still married and very happy. And yet this is an imagery, but it reflected how she, not really how she was, because everybody has the heart alive, fully alive inside of them, but how she felt about herself. So that's another way. And your way of just directly seeing, You have a capacity to directly see the possibility of being in the heart instead of being in your old drama. And you have consistently, the drama has sort of its allure, and you go there and you see, I don't want this, and you opt for love again. And you've just done that for, several years now, very consistently. And it has changed you profoundly, and it's just wonderful to watch. That is heart sourcing, because you're coming back to the source of the love in you. It helps that we're in this relationship, but it's you who's coming back to that love every time, and very quickly. I mean, amazingly quickly. Okay.
How about we sing?
I am trying to understand what she said because it's very interesting. But could it be that she's confusing emotions and feelings with that emptiness where the heart really is? Because it's like being in a busy city all the time with that noise, and suddenly being a lake. So you can feel like there is nothing here, but there is a lake, there is a lot of, and maybe she is in that place and is not able to see the heart because it feels for her like emptiness because there is no emotion, there is no drama. But I think she's there. Only maybe
so
she
just hear that and ask yourself if this is true, what she's saying.
She doesn't recognize. It's like the people that is so
I
overwhelmed.
remember a time when I was with Ma Jaya, my teacher here in America, and she looked at me. We were driving someplace, and she says, "Boy, you're in bliss." And I'm going like, "What the hell are you talking about?" I wasn't aware of it. But her making that comment just made me check and say, yeah, wow, it's true. I had no idea. I was really in a state of bliss, but it's so subtle.
Yeah.
You see, we're used to gross emotions.
Mm.
If somebody hits you over the head and you get mad, right? Well, that we know we're feeling something, right? But we're attuned to that. But these feelings of the heart, this essence of the heart is very subtle. And, I was in a deep state of bliss. I know that now because I remember that moment still today. And this was like in the late 70s. And I recognized the subtlety of that bliss. It comes with an increased awareness of stillness. As you become more still, just like I said, stillness is needed so we get to tune in with us. Then you get to know more subtle sensations inside of you. And that's where the bliss, where the happiness, where the love, this subtle love lies. And the more subtle, the more powerful, really. But we can just be tuned out. And one of the reasons why we're tuned out is that for lifetimes, really, we have labored under this illusion that love is hard to come by and that we're going to be betrayed or abandoned or whatever, and we just rather not have anything to do with it. And it's just a waste. But that's where a lot of people are stuck for a long time. But nothing is for everyone. So this is really heart sourcing for the people who somehow something touches them about this, and just like in your case, you may not know what it is really. It's like, well, he's talking, but it sounds good, but I can't feel it, right? I have many friends like that who were like that for a long time. Yes, please.
Isn't it true what we are seeking is also seeking us?
I'm sorry, a little louder.
What we are seeking is also seeking us.
What we're thinking.
What we are
Seeking.
seeking.
She's saying,
Yes,
isn't
What we are
it?
seeking is also seeking us.
Yeah, totally. Right, totally. It's like we say, you take one step toward God and God takes 50 steps toward you.
Right. So
Absolutely.
she doesn't see it, but it's seeking her.
Yeah.
She's seeking it.
Beautiful point.
Yeah.
Kamala says, sorry, I just jumped there because she's been trying to participate for months, and she
Thank you,
get
Kamala.
it done right now. Heart sourcing has not been a natural thing for me either. It has taken me a long time to become aware of and feel the heart. Listening to the CD is helpful. I pick specific times to remember, like standing in line at a store or at a red light. Just
Beautiful.
another comment.
I know Kamala is another one. She was just like a little bit like that. And something just like, different from you, but something in her just got the taste of it. And she just went for it, went for it, went for it. And then you hear it like that. Please.
I always, well, for a time, I understood about the love that we feel for others is really inside of is our love. How you can do to find out when something or a kind of love or that love is really missing and you think that you have it but it's really not there because you might be replacing with another thing, like anxious.
Yeah, well, I don't know, maybe you guys can contribute to this just in the same way. I just have one answer. It's like the mind gets confused on many different levels. But there's something inside of us that isn't confused about that, right? Your mind may be blocking you from becoming aware of the essence of your heart, that capacity. But there's something in your mind that isn't fooled by that, right? There's something deeper, that intuitive intelligence, and it's just like, it doesn't leave you alone. It keeps nudging. Yeah, I want something more. I want something more, right? And then we see all the replacements that we find, right? Oh, I think I'll settle for loving this or that or this person.
No, I have a problem specifically. I am replacing a lot with food, which is like I can eat like consciously all the time. So at what point I realized like, okay, I have a problem here. Like something is missing inside.
Right.
But I remember times when I felt like a big, immense love for my family or an ex-boyfriend. So I felt it and I knew it and recognized that it was inside me. So that helps me in that moment.
Well, so then you want that love again.
But something, so like I don't know why I continue, feeling that anxiety.
Well, you know what? I wouldn't even get so much interested in why. Leave that to the psychologists.
Okay.
I've done that for a long time, right? I find it very slow. It's not that there aren't solutions, but it's just very slow, right? For me, the question is how? How do I deal with this, right? So here I find myself eating because there's an emptiness inside, and I want to fill this emptiness.
Well, I think it's because of that.
Yeah, right. So, and you're saying you have felt that love, wonderful. But that love, when you felt that love, was it not connected with the outer objects that you loved, the family, etc., right? So that's always time limited. This happens for a while, and then it goes away. And the people may even still be there, but that depth of love is not there, right? And that brings the encouragement for you to seek not the replacement, aka food, or drugs, or watching too much TV, or whatever we do, all these different things. All the addictions come out of that. But to look for the real source, and I'm pointing to the real source. The real source is in you. And so there's both this feeling of emptiness, of need, and the not yet fully discovered source that can fill that need, which is the heart. So that emptiness, that lack, will torture you until you find the key to open the place that can really fulfill you, which is your own essence, your own heart. right? How? Well, I told you some ways here, right? Yeah. And it's really a very individual thing. It's like as the teacher of this, I can only point at it, right? And then every one of you finds your own way. And these things that, the imaginary thing with the point of light and the sun and all that kind of stuff, that can be helpful for some people. The mantra can be helpful. These things have been used for thousands of years, but usually not as pointed to the heart as we're doing that now. Or, the breathing into the heart, or the, just the yearning of unlocking this potential in you. You see, this is like this prayer. And some people have this powerful, fervent prayers because they have a relationship with a higher power, with a God, with Jesus. Whoever, whatever is that powerful presence for them. And if you don't have that, the power of prayer is just as powerful for you, because your prayer for that love, for that which can fulfill that yearning, that craving in you. You see, you wouldn't have the craving and the food problem if that hunger wasn't there. Right? That yearning, you want something, you want it, right? So now deepen that yearning. And have that prayer that the real source of it should open up for you. If you want that with all your mind and all your heart, it will happen, and it will happen quite quickly. But these things don't happen overnight, because we've had habits of seeking substitutes for, like I said, you can use this life and say, how many years am I alive? Subtract the first 3, and then you have about the amount of years that we've yearned for that always, and try to get it from the outer source. Or you can look at many lifetimes, and then you really see the big scenario. So we've done this for a long time, but it changes actually very quickly, considering the time span that we have cultivated the hopeless search for the substitute. What I love in your story is that you have the craving, you have that need, that hunger, right? Just understand that hunger is ultimately not for food. It is the hunger for love. And give that to you. Then there can be a thought like, I'm not worthy of it. I don't deserve it. I've done bad. All of those kind of things. They're just thoughts. We have the remedy here, right? The remedy is the way that you can look at your mind and clear it of all that stuff that isn't true. But as long as we believe it, it is true for us. So we need to work with that. I hear that a lot, this sense of, I don't believe it. Somebody just wrote me in, I had this thought of working with you, but I just have this sense that I don't deserve it. I don't deserve that love, right? Well, the door is shut with that thought. But that thought is a lie, as soon as you find out.
There's one more question here by Kay. Why are we given these powerful brains which we can disappear into, which keep us from the heart? I'm reading correctly. Why are we given these powerful brains which can disappear into, which keep us from the heart?
Yeah. Because we're afraid. We come into this world as these little beings, these little cherubs that are just heart and body, nothing else, right? No mind yet. And then we get enculturated into being little human beings. And we develop this sense of ego, this sense that I am this body, I'm this being, and I'm separate from everyone else. And therefore, I have to protect myself and I have to get what I need. So the basic forces of disturbance set in, which is desire and fear, and what comes out of them is confusion. And the biggest confusion is about who we actually are. We mistake ourselves for this character on the screen of the mind that we then call me all the time. So in the process of that, then we develop this great machinery of the mind. And it's all about trying to figure out how to live and how to be safe and how to make it in this world and how to feel good about ourselves and all that kind of stuff. And we do it to the mind. And when the mind is focused on simple things like how to send a man to the moon, then it can be useful and has its right place. It can serve us. But if the mind tries to do something that it's not made for, like how to live in a relationship well, which is much more complicated than sending a man to the moon, then the mind can't handle it. And we keep going back to the mind and trying to figure it out. And then we end up in a divorce anyway. So we need to use the mind to its best capacity, which is the recognition of the value of the heart. And then we can realize that the mind is like the moon. The sun, the heart is like the sun. The moon doesn't have its own light. It is a reflected light of the sun. The power comes from the heart. And so we recognize that about the heart, the mind. And we can then use the mind where it's useful to deal with practical matters, and then leave it. And not be hypnotized by this constant stream of thinking. And that comes with practice, of course, because that's what happens automatically in the conditioned mind. Thinking. You get up and it runs all day and it captures you. We disappear into that mind, that thinking stream that is so much not us. So we have to wean ourselves out. We have to wake ourselves up out of that hypnosis of the mind and keep coming back, dropping back into the heart again and again and again, and recondition our being so we get to live out of the fullness of who we are, out of that amazing love that we're capable of. And that's really the work of the human beings, because the heart is already fully formed in us, it's already fully present. But the mind, the fear-based mind, does not allow us access to it. But the mind is not our boss. It acts like it, and then we're in trouble. The boss is the true self, which is that deepest heart. And we need to put the king on his throne. That real self has to begin to rule. And all we do here is really talk about how to do that. And then the mind becomes, the symbol in Hinduism is so wonderful. It's the monkey mind. Runs and runs and runs and doesn't leave you any peace. And then the mind gets devotion. Suddenly the game changes. And when that mind is trained, it turns into Hanuman, that great devotee, the monkey god. It's so hard for the Western mind to understand. A monkey is a god. Well, that's got to be a primitive religion. So there's this monkey who is all love, all heart. It's the mind that has been disciplined, that has been found the heart. That monkey is love. That mind serves the heart. And that is the power of faith. Because through that process of weaning yourself out of the mind and coming to live increasingly from the heart, you develop a faith in your being, your capacity to live in this enlightened love that is not based on belief, on something you heard, on what people should believe in due to the good old religion. No, it's based on your direct experience. Because you realize every time you love, whether it's you love you love someone else, you love, you get that juice from the heart. And that becomes a foundation of faith in you. And it is the faith that can move mountains. And it's funny when you look at the symbols. There you have Hanuman carrying the mountaintop, and that's a whole long story I'm not going to get into, right? In Hindu mythology. And there is Jesus talking about if you had just faith, you could move mountains. You see? So that faith grows out of the direct experience of the heart. And all of you are hungry for it. And because you're hungry for it, you shall get it. You shall get it, because that's the primary force in your being. But you can get it slower, you can get it fast. That's to some extent up to you. Because we empower our hang-ups, we empower our pain body. So let's get over it. Okay, I think we're run out of time here. We run out of time. So sorry. Thank you for joining us. And we'll be back here in 2 weeks. And we are never separated in this space of the heart. Namaste.